Namaste viewers and welcome to Amazing Vedas with Dr. Pariksith Singh. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for joining us. I think your love and commitment to the Veda is such that Sundays, Mondays, it's all the same. And by the way, it's the same for me. It's quite late in the evening, but I so look forward to these conversations. So before we get started on your next tweet on X, I just wanted to refer you back to what you said in the last one, which we read out. Uh, because you said something very interesting in the end of that tweet, which is fundamentally that when you started rereading the masters like Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo, after going back to the Vedas, it brought about a new understanding. Now, what do you mean by that? Because let me quote what you said. You said, at least for me, the Veda has completely transformed my yoga. And I must say, even my understanding of great rishis such as Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. They helped me learn of the Veda from the Veda. The Veda helps me understand them better.
So, Swami Vivekananda, of course, as you know, one unique thing about him, which is, I'm sure you have written a lot about him. So, unique thing about him is he had to touch the thing himself. He had to experience it himself. It did not matter how technically correct he was. He talked about who he was. And I heard someone recently from a more traditional school say, oh, Swami Vivekananda made some mistakes when it came to Vedanta. Huh? The giant, the one who awakened the whole country to its possibilities, who awakened the whole world to India's possibilities, he was technically not right about Vedanta. And that reminds me of that famous conversation he had, I think, with the Pandit in Madras. So Swami Vivekananda was in conversation with him, and he's saying something, and the Pandit says, no. The Shastra does not say so. So Swami Vivekananda, being who he was, he says, but I, Vivekananda, say so. And the Pandit was flummoxed. I mean, it's not done. You do not stand against the Shastra. But Swami Vivekananda has had this thing, I have to live it. And that consistency, I think, stayed with him throughout. Even if you look at the earliest exploration, who is a teacher, who is worthy enough to be my teacher? I mean, he didn't say that. Have you seen God? Have you seen God? Have you seen? No. If you haven't done, everything else is theory. I mean, look at the integrity. And this is the integrity we have to have when we explore anything. Okay, one word, one nirukta, you can explore, you can do the research. TV Kapali Shastri says this, Yas Muni says this. Do you touch it? Do you experience it? Do you experience the feeling they're having? And that can only come through great art. I mean, I'm more and more convinced that is an integration. Yes, we call it mantra, but what is mantra? It's great art. We can absorb it. It becomes living in us. It is not an intellectual statement. It is not a mentalization. And so that is something that Swami Vivekananda did. And one thing he said, which is very powerful, which I think one of his speeches on what a rishi means. And he says that India is a unique culture, a unique civilization that was built by rishis, not by businessmen, shopkeepers,
or
kings, conquerors, no, by rishis. And then he says, typical Swami Vivekananda, says, you need to be a rishi. I mean, he's directly communicating, and that's how I took him. You have to be a rishi. And You have to be a greater Rishi than the ones we had. And so suddenly you say, yes, why not? Why do we put ourselves here and put them here? Of course, they were great people. They were giants. But they were also humans like us. They also rose from most difficult situations surrounding them. Look at Vishwamitra, Dirghatamasa. Look at your Shunakshepa, what they went through. And they discovered. We also need to discover that Rishihood in us. And then, of course, Sri Aurobindo, who gives us the third way of looking at Rig Veda again, not as a unique original interpretation, but as how it was at that time. Understanding that the language was different, the symbols were different, the way language was used was different, the rhythms, how they work, the whole worldview was different, and that mind, which is totally, you may even say, alien to the modern mind. That mind is not something we can even appreciate. We can just barely touch it. But if we can get deep into the Veda, we can perhaps begin to touch that mind, that way of seeing, that outlook. And suddenly you're no longer a human being living on earth, fighting the forces, struggling for yourself. Suddenly they open up they open up 7 layers of consciousness for you, which you inhabit at every level. Even at the level of the Bhu, you have 7 layers of consciousness. Bhuva, 7 layers of consciousness. Swaha, 7 layers of consciousness. Trihe Saptani. So each Vyahriti has 7 layers, and we embody that. We are that. Now, can you imagine the possibility open to us? We restrict ourselves, the mind-body dichotomy, we're still stuck there. Mind-body dichotomy, you have 7 layers of septotomy, if we may say that. But it is not division, it is an integration. They work with each other. They are fully aligned, and that's how we are created. These are not separate. Still, there is a unity among all of these, and there's a uniqueness to all of these. Each is unique, each is beautiful, each is special. So we learn that from Sri Aurobindo, and then you understand the vision of these people. Sri Aurobindo's poetry, where he is, if you remember that, the cosmic, what was that, where he is feeling the bombs in Spain and the pain of someone else somewhere else. Or Swami Vivekananda, one night he was hurting and there was an earthquake, in another place, and he could feel that. You can feel that they were identifying with a universal awareness. And
exactly. And now they've done a lot of research on non-locality of consciousness.
yes, yes,
And, just to come back to what you said, the fundamental point, I think, in our tradition, the Sanatani tradition, is that the only scripture worth quoting is the scripture that you live. Otherwise, it's just book knowledge. And,
yes, yes,
Swami Vivekananda was, in that sense, a great rebel. Even with Sri Ramakrishna, he questioned and questioned and questioned him till he actually experienced that state that
yes,
Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about. And interestingly, after his guru passed away, he wanted to meet Pavahari Baba. He had these discussions
yes,
with Pramathanath Mitra and other people, trying to understand the finer points of the scriptures. But and what a great struggle it was, when he was a parivrajak, wandering around, no food, doesn't know where he's going to sleep the night. But it's through that cauldron of fire, of great tapas, again, Agni Mele Purohitai, as it were, that they reconnected with something so vital. And once they were reconnecting with that, he awakened the nation itself, which was in a moribund state and, very enslaved in every which way. So these are precisely the mind forged manacles that Blake was talking about, who was also a great mystic. Wow. Blake actually understood what was happening through the tremendous repression, that centuries of a particular, whatever religious doctrine of Christianity, original sin, etc., the havoc it had created, in the psyche of
Yes.
hundreds. So Blake was a great mystic. So now, can I also now request you to read another tweet, which, in a sense, completely sums up this whole idea, of how we have to overcome or burst out of these narrow confines. Uh, if you can find this, Veda for Gen Z, RV114, and where you say the one great sin that is brought out to me by the Veda right off the bat is narrowness, being small, considering myself powerless and insignificant in
Yes.
this universe. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Ah, Veda for Gen Z, Rig Veda 1.1.4. So that's the fourth Rig in the first mandala. The one great sin that is brought out to me by the Veda right off the bat is narrowness, being small, considering myself powerless and insignificant in this universe. In the fourth Rig of the first Suktam itself, the transformation begins. Agni widens and surrounds the seeker from all sides. Vishvataf paribhurasi. As his or her armor, as the leader of the journey, Advarya, and as the dynamic continuum between the seeker's consciousness and the universal powers called Devas. No, I'm here to know myself, the Agni within and the bliss he generates, the expansion he initiates, and the universe he makes me become. No, I'm not a trifle consciousness seeking only for myself, but seeking for the whole universe and as the universe, which is my family and my existence. No, I can conquer myself and the world and bring it greater light and truth with utmost surrender and love and transform it without ego. This is how I see the Veda. Perhaps we all will too someday. Narrowness is my first sin.
Absolutely. Wonderfully put. Because, we realize that we ourselves are narrowing our capacities and limiting our potential. And what a wonderful message for young people. You look at a typical teenager today, and how they are almost encouraged by everything, not only peer pressure, but what they read and write and see on media, social media, TV, the stereotypical rebelliousness, of the teenager, and how, their so-called psychological problems and so on and so forth. If we only created an environment where a teenager coming into, the full force even of their physical capacities suddenly sees themselves as a being of almost, expanding infinite power, joy, radiance, light, leadership. How wonderful that would be, and which brings us, to the book again. The book, I feel, is going to be a very important step in this rediscovery of who we are, especially for the young, because they've been given a very wrong kind of education, by and large, and we are not able to give them, I think, the support they need to fully blossom, and express themselves fully as human beings.
Yeah, and I can say that anytime and this is a new realization after reading the Veda more and more and chanting it, is anytime I come across a problem, it is a problem of my own pettiness. Whatever problems, emotional problems, mental problems, psychological issues, conceptual issues, philosophic issues, because I see myself as this small mental consciousness that is trying to solve an issue. And the moment I grow wider, my perspective gets wider. I'm able to see not just from this narrow perspective, but see from the perspective of so many others around me and something even bigger than that, then what happens to the problems? There are no problems. My disagreement with a colleague, or what happens suddenly when I've widened myself and I can see his perspective at the same time as mine, not as mine and his, but as two perspectives. Suddenly you can see the value, the validity in each. And oftentimes they have an element of truth. Otherwise, they would not be holding it so passionately, so intensely, sincerely. So, disagreements, confusion, and running a group of an organization of more than 1,000 people every day. Every day there is some human issue, and every time you try to listen. And sometimes you say, but that's such a foolish thing that you're stressed over, until you realize, you look at it from that other person's perspective. It is not foolish at all. It is almost an urgency. And if you realize that urgency and if you appreciate it, suddenly that problem starts getting resolved. Maybe not for them, but for me. See, and the moment it gets resolved for me, it suddenly becomes more easy to address it. Suddenly we can both look at the issue as it is, as if it's something outside of us, which it is. That's not who we are, which is outside. And we go, okay, and immediately when you start looking, often things will get resolved. The moment you start communicating, engaging, coming together in that space, not as two individuals who have taken a stance, but just awareness, deeply engaged, suddenly that duality starts disappearing into something beautiful, and harmony, as you said, resolution happens. So I've learned the hard way over the years, managing human beings is a big challenge. Managing organizations with all the financial pressures, all the issues, organizational issues, management issues. But these are all issues of my own deficiency, of my own constrictive or constricted existence. And the moment I pull my straitjacket falls off, it's boom. Suddenly all the issues go away. I saw this beautiful story, and I don't know, it was a little animation film where this man is sitting at the ghat and he's having a lot of agony and all. The little boy comes and he gives him a glass of water, and he takes 1 tablespoonful of salt in it and gives it to him. And he says, "Ooh, that's terrible. I can't tolerate it." He says, "Oh." Then he takes that tablespoon full of salt and throws it in the river, takes the water from the river and gives it to him, and he drinks it. Says, "But the same salt, I put the same salt in the river, but you can hold it." And so suddenly that issue that was so big in a glass, suddenly in the river, it's no longer an issue. And so that's something I realize is what I have learned. And the Veda constantly brings it out, constantly talks about a bigger existence than yours, right? Yasmin Vishwa Anipansyaha, or Maho Arna Saraswati, Dhiyo Vishwa Virajati, or Agneyai Yajna Madvaram, Vishwataf Paribhurasi. Vishwa keeps coming, every suktam, the Vishwa comes. And every time it comes, it is absolutely beautifully brought out as a realization these teachers had, these masters had. And I think if we see that, we need to do the same thing. Grow up, widen yourself, grow the adhara so you can hold it. And so that is, I think, one thing we all can learn from the Veda.
Absolutely. Thank you. We said last time that all problems are problems of harmony. And we realized that disharmony comes, in a sense, from that narrowness that you talked about. And narrowness comes from false identification.
Yes.
So if your glass is so small and the salt is the problem, it becomes inedible. That water becomes, undrinkable. It's so, salty. So it's like brine. But if your problem, you stop identifying with it, your little glass, and it becomes a human problem. It's a species problem, or it's a, problem of the entirety of human experience. And you cease to identify with it and, give it the energy and power through your own mental attachment to it, then it turns into something totally different, frankly. And then you see, once that wideness comes, the perspective changes. There is some distance from that particular problem. And just to conclude, I was talking to a doctor this morning, very interestingly, who suffered from tinnitus, and he had this uh, terrible 6, 8 months. And then he did a lot of research on it, and he realized, I mean, that's what he told me, that, evidence has shown that sometimes your first response to it creates a pattern in the brain, a groove in the brain. And if you react with great alarm and fear and anxiety, then the brain reinforces that response. So he had to undergo this kind of cognitive behavior therapy, the change. He had to consciously redirect, as it were, the the thought current, so that they don't view that difficulty in that fashion, by treating it like an emergency or whatever. And he's overcome it, I must say. So you can see once again that most problems are problems of our own making, of our own doing. And in the end, they are problems of narrowness. And the Veda, if nothing else, it immediately widens your perspective. You stop identifying with the so called body mind entity and begin to see yourself as much wider. And going back to Vedas for Gen Z, I think younger people, they need to stop being so hormonally identified. I mean, they're much greater than the, welter or storm of hormones that are coursing through their bodies, though these are facts. And we are never going to say ignore the facts. But I guess the Vedas are an invitation to the widening of the spirit, and to embracing a much, I would say, much, universal, you said, Vishwa, that sort of outlook. So, with those words, thank you, Dr. Singh, and thank you, viewers, for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I want to invite you to join us on this journey, and to please, should I say, support us, because we want to create authentic content for the new generation. Because I think it's our duty to pass on whatever little wisdom we might have garnered over the years, over the decades. And I hope our sincerity is something that shows in our efforts. Thank you, and see you soon. Thank you, Dr. Singh.